I had a very, very successful career within the pharmaceutical and healthcare industry, 25 years. Rapid promotions, increases in salary. Now I have nothing. Now I'm blackballed from the industry. I'm not accepted. I've applied repeatedly, American companies, Swiss companies, British companies. I've applied everywhere. I'm rejected. I'm obviously untouchable.
The Swiss frontier, an American businessman crosses into Italy. Back in Switzerland, his adopted home, he's at the center of a controversy that has shaken the Swiss pharmaceutical industry. Branded a whistleblower and threatened with legal action, he's now forced to go abroad to bring his story into the open. It's a story that began here at the headquarters of Swiss drug company Seelag. On the 24th of June 1985, a payment order was sent for the approval of marketing manager Richard D'Agostino.
I received on my desk this payment order. It's a payment order for the amount of 20,000 Swiss francs, which is approximately $13,000, $14,000 US dollars.
The money, a consultancy fee, was to go to Professor Rudolf Preissig, chair of Switzerland's expert committee on the safety of medicines. Their job to decide which drugs were safe for public use.
So he was key in Switzerland. He was the man in Switzerland. I couldn't believe that Seelag, Johnson & Johnson, was asking me or anyone else to make a payment to Professor Rudolf Preissig, the head of the expert committee for the Swiss regulation authorities.
And one reason for paying him, another Seelag memo spelt it out.
The well-balanced attitude which Professor Preissig has been showing makes us assume that if problems arise in the future, he will represent our interests. In these times, it is good to have friends.
Seelag told us that there was nothing illegal or unethical about their relationship with Professor Preissig.
So do you think that the payments were right that were made to you? Do you think they were above board?
Oh, absolutely. They weren't made to me, they were made to my department.
Right.
And they were used for research.
In fact, for 10 years, Seelag made regular personal consultancy payments direct to Preissig. The last one went straight into Preissig's private bank account, number 64, shown on the payment order which D'Agostino refused to sign.
I had a surprise visit by my direct supervisor, who was responsible for Seelag in Germany, who asked me again and again, are you going to sign, are you going to sign? And I said, no, I'm sorry, I cannot sign this, I will not sign this.
D'Agostino felt forced to resign. He's now suing for wrongful dismissal. Seelag maintained his resignation had nothing to do with the Preissig affair. Preissig was cleared of illegal and unethical conduct by 2 Swiss inquiries.
Do you think you were wrongly accused?
Of course so.
Yes.
Absolutely.
What do you feel about Mr. D'Agostino, who lost his job through the whole affair?
Oh, that's his problem, not mine.
There's no question that my career has been absolutely shattered and ruined.
In 1988, Preissig resigned from the safety committee. A month earlier, the Swiss had changed the rules to forbid any member of their Safety of Medicines committee from receiving personal consultancy payments from drug companies. Here in Britain, our own Committee on the Safety of Medicines, based at the Department of Health offices in South London, has different rules. Of its 21 members, only 3 don't receive any money from drug companies for any purpose. 13 of them have personal consultancies or drug company shares. All members declare their interests and abstain from discussions on those companies' products. Is the Department of Health concerned about members' links with the drugs industry? They stated, the members are at the forefront of research and sponsorship by drug companies helps keep them abreast of new developments. Ministers have full confidence in the personal integrity of members of the Committee on Safety of Medicines.
How are you feeling?
Dr. Joe Collier lectures on pharmacology, the science of drugs, at St. George's Hospital Medical School.
But what we do know is that only 3 of the 21 members doesn't have links with the industry. So only 3 are truly independent. And those links are quite large in some instances, probably £20,000–30,000 a year for consultancies. And others may have their departments paid for by the pharmaceutical industry.
Set up in 1970 after thalidomide, the CSM screens new drugs for dangerous side effects. For as well as their undoubted benefits, all drugs can have side effects, some more serious than others. Opren, licensed by the CSM, was later withdrawn after being associated with over 60 deaths. Other drugs, still available, can also sometimes be dangerous. 23-year-old Hughie Connolly strained a muscle playing football. After 3 weeks' treatment with an anti-inflammatory painkiller, he began to suffer stomach pains.
I thought, oh God, what's happening? I'm going to die here, like, you know, because I've never had that pain before in my life. And I was here. I shouted my mother to come in and all that. And she said she'll get a doctor straight away. But the doctor came out and he said, like, examined me and all that, he goes, you may have got a burst ulcer. I'm going to admit you to hospital straight away.
Most patients will have no problems whatsoever and will be greatly benefited by the use of these drugs. Nevertheless, we must not lose sight of the fact that overall in a community, a high number of patients will develop a bleeding or perforated peptic ulcer, and of those patients, a third to a quarter will die from that.
And when I went to hospital and all that operation, I asked him what caused this ulcer to burst, and he said the tablets definitely caused it. I could have been killed. Burst ulcer has been known to kill people.
Britain's pharmaceutical industry is one of the success stories of the 20th century. Its contribution to modern medicine has been enormous, helping to eradicate disease and alleviate suffering. And that success is reflected in the profits it makes. The National Health Service, its biggest customer, spends £3 billion a year on drugs. Half of all the government money spent on general practice goes on prescriptions, and the industry is one of Britain's biggest export earners too, boosting our trade balance by over £1 billion a year. Representing 120 of Britain's drug companies is the Association of the British Pharmaceutical Industry, the ABPI.
It's an industry which is based on the research and development motivation. It's an industry which is driven by a search for the highest standards in terms of quality, of safety, and of efficacy of its products. It's an industry which I think is always striving to do things better and wants to sustain the confidence of the public in its activities and in the products that it produces. It spends an enormous sum of money on research and development. In fact, in this country alone, we spend some £900 million a year on research and development.
The industry also spends heavily on promoting its products, £180 million a year. That's over £2,000 for every doctor in Britain. And that promotion starts at the top.
The first people who seem to be targeted when a drug company wants to launch a product are what are known as the opinion formers, hospital consultants, specialists in particular areas like heart disease. To the pharmaceutical industry, promotion is very, very important indeed, and there's no doubt they're experts, they're wizards.
One of those experts at promotion, Nigel McCartney, until 3 years ago, an area sales manager for drug company Pfizer.
It's very, very important that you have key opinion leaders who are the professors and consultants in those particular fields. There are a lot of very similar drugs. It's very vital that you got your particular drug endorsed. And I spent a lot of my time to get them to symposia abroad and to fix up meetings with them and our medical department. We would pay for the travel, accommodation and subsistence, Paris, Geneva, through to New York or the United States, Hawaii. Anywhere where there's a symposium held, we would send our favourite people on that.
The Hague, capital of Holland, one of Europe's diplomatic centres. This March, 2,000 heart specialists from around the world gathered here for a major conference on heart disease. Conferences like this are organised by doctors who approach drug companies for sponsorship. Such meetings play a vital part in the exchange of medical information. In this case, 3 companies who had recently launched new heart drugs sponsored the conference, which also provided an ideal platform for promoting their products. 2 of the companies, Bristol Myers Squibb and Merck Sharp & Dohme, or MSD, paid for around 50 British consultants to come to the conference. They were flown over and put up in some of Holland's best hotels, all courtesy of the drug companies. And after the day's lectures and seminars, doctors were entertained at restaurants like the Auberge de Quivette, where a meal will cost around £50 without the wine. And on the last day, a special gala evening. Cost £50 a head, unless a drug company is paying.
How do you feel about the fact that it's a scientific conference and a drug company is providing so much entertainment, spending so much money?
I would think that's a fairly typical situation, really.
Did you pay for yourself tonight? Did you pay for any of your meals in the restaurants in The Hague?
No.
Are you paying for your hotel?
No.
Did you pay for your flight?
No.
Are you paying for your flight back?
No.
I mean, don't you think that when somebody's spending so much money on you that it might really influence you towards prescribing their drugs?
No.
Why can't doctors pay for themselves to go to a conference if they're interested?
I mean, I personally couldn't afford to come here on my own salary.
So don't you think that gives the drug company an opportunity to influence you then? Why do they do it?
I think they create a good impression.
Who paid for your flight here?
Well, it's a question, isn't it? But just because you're interested, I don't have to answer your question.
I mean, you're paid for by Bristol Myers Squibb, aren't you? Or MSD?
It could be. It could be.
Aren't you worried that that might influence you in your medical judgment?
Oh, I see, that's what's behind your question. Well, no, it doesn't, actually. Because one decides on the prescription of certain drugs according to their merits.
Can I ask you a few questions about your job?
No. The MSD representative was reluctant to discuss her company's spending on travel and hospitality. On trips like these, doctors are governed by the General Medical Council's professional code. Hospitality, it says, should not be lavish, but should be at a level which doctors would normally adopt if they were paying for themselves.
Why do the drug companies take you to restaurants like the Auberge de Quivette, for example? It costs about £50 a head.
That's their affair.
Do you normally spend £50 on yourself when you go to a restaurant?
Not really, do you? I mean, I accept the implication that the receipt of hospitality and the indebtedness that might arise from it may influence judgment. And you just have to accept that when it comes to practicing medicine, one must have a clinical approach.
Dr. Brian Lewis is on the council of the British Medical Association. Does he believe that doctors are influenced by free hospitality from drug companies?
No, I don't. I think my experience of the vast majority of the medical profession is that they are fair, well-balanced people who behave sensibly, and I don't believe for a moment that their prescribing habits are distorted away from what is right for their patient or exercises reasonable economy in the budgets which they have. I would not venture to suggest that there will not be some who will be distorted, have their views distorted, and where that is the name of the game. But it's a very small number.
They run rings round doctors and they run rings round the government, because the government's got other things to do, whereas, of course, the only thing the industry's got to do is sell their products. And as I said, they're extraordinarily good at it.
Just how good the industry is at selling was demonstrated this year by Pfizer's launch of a new heart drug, a calcium antagonist called Istin. When a new drug is launched, the Department of Health allow a company like Pfizer to spend up to £1 million within the first 2 years on promotion. Brocket Hall in Hertfordshire, advertised as England's finest conference centre, it was here that Pfizer invited 24 leading heart consultants for 2 nights and a seminar on Istin, along with a seminar, champagne cocktails and a tour of Lord Brocket's Ferrari collection. And in the evening, a banquet in what's claimed to be the finest dining room in the country. Used by heads of state and royalty, Brocket Hall does not come cheap. The minimum price for a 2-day conference with dinner and accommodation, £500 a head. Total cost to Pfizer, at least £12,000. Next stop, Gleneagles. Advertised as Europe's finest resort hotel, this is where Pfizer chose to introduce Scotland's heart specialists to the benefits of Istin. Pfizer's conference on the new drug was held in surroundings that offered 5-star luxury and every facility for pampering guests. Also at the conference was freelance medical journalist Kate de Selincourt. The drug company Pfizer had paid not only her expenses, but another £800 to write articles for doctors' magazines.
I was invited by the drug company to go. The firm decided they would hire their own journalist, me, to go and write the articles and send them to these 2 papers. Most medical journalists know what's going on, and we all try. But if a conference is entirely about a drug, then you've got no choice. If you want to come away with a story, it's got to be about that drug. It's a pretty posh hotel, and there are golf courses, and obviously quite a lot of them were looking forward to their round of golf.
Handed out at Pfizer's Gleneagles conference, this brochure on Istin, we showed it to Dr. Collier.
And it was astounded me, absolutely astounded me, because it seemed to claim that this particular drug, Istin, would reduce sudden deaths in people who took it. Now, this was a very exciting claim, but I knew of no data for it, and I couldn't find any data for it in the journals I looked at, so I immediately wrote to the Department of Health.
The Medicines Control Agency took immediate action under the Medicines Act and stated the company have agreed to amend their promotional literature.
But then a month later, I got an additional copy, a further copy, and I noticed they'd made no changes whatsoever. So there we have an odd situation where the Department of Health is trying, in this sort of circumstance, but seems to be failing to actually control the companies who seem to have a cynical disregard for the law in this way. And I think this is outrageous, and we've seen it happening under our own eyes.
Geneva Airport and the start of another phase in Pfizer's Istin campaign. Their representative is meeting a party of British heart consultants off the London plane. They've been invited on a communication course to help them improve their lecture skills. And the venue for this educational event, the #1 ski resort in the French Alps.
Courchevel. Clear blue azure skies with the air as fresh and as pure as sparkling crystals. Courchevel, the #1 ski resort of the French Alps. The choice of accommodation includes apartments, chalets, and over 50 hotels of every category.
The category of accommodation chosen by Pfizer, the best hotel in the resort. Pfizer's invitation pointed out that you can ski right from the hotel doors. The company offered to arrange ski passes for the doctors. And in the evening, leisure time built into the programme. A night out at one of the best restaurants in town. At the end of the 4-course meal, speeches and a vote of thanks from the doctors.
Nigel, Pfizer, well, what can I say? With great thought to bring us to such a lovely environment, with such lovely people, with such lovely stimulation. Great credit company. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Are you here on business, for example?
Partly business.
Are you here for a conference? The conference is here in the hotel?
Yes.
Would you normally stay in a hotel like this?
What do you mean personally? Probably not, because I have 4 children, mortgage and school fees.
Did you pay for your flight here?
No, the whole weekend was sponsored by this company.
May I ask what company that was?
Well, I think it would be wrong for me to divulge that information.
Would you please leave? These gentlemen are in the middle of their dinner. Please,
do you have any idea what the reason might be?
Could you take them out, please? Thank you.
I am the manager of this hotel. You give me the cassette.
After the conferences and the trips abroad for top specialists, a new drug has got to be promoted to family doctors. Spreading that message is the medical representative, or drug rep. Their aim, to put their company's products on the prescription pads of GPs throughout the country. There's one drug rep for every 9 GPs in Britain. The industry call them educators.
The medical representative is acting as the key interface between the medical profession and the industry. They are the ambassadors of the industry, and in this respect, their role is a crucially important one.
Maureen Plantagenet worked as a drug rep for the UK arm of French multinational company Roussel. How did she see her role?
It's a very unpleasant job, and you feel much more like a geisha girl than a salesperson or a representative. You feel that you've always got to be charming and flattering, and you're not supposed to have any real feelings. So it's a highly unpleasant job.
We were salesmen, and that was the whole job, was to sell the drugs. But the public face given to patients and the public in general was very, very different.
Registered nurse Eric Kearley worked as a medical representative for the British end of Swiss pharmaceutical giant Ciba-Geigy for 21 years. He saw an important change in that time.
We went from ethical selling to hard selling. Hard sell, 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 sell. Despite anything, sell the product. And this was despite everything and in spite of everything. And we, after all, are not selling chocolate bars, and great respect to chocolate or anything else. And we're not selling clothes or shoes, we're selling medicine.
But how did Ciba-Geigy see the job of their representatives? The company's overall policy director is Dr. Gwen Parr.
The medical representative should provide all the information he possibly can. Our reps are well selected. They're not just any Tom, Dick and Harry off the street. They're well trained as well as being properly selected. They should be able to provide all the information that the doctor expects of them.
Next patient, please. Come on in.
When a patient visits their doctor, they know that they are covered by the strictest professional code of all. If doctors prescribe drugs, then only one thing should influence them: the welfare of the patient. But for the pharmaceutical industry, every prescription means potential profit. So the promotion of drugs to doctors is covered by a detailed code of practice drawn up by the government, the British Medical Association and the ABPI, and policed by the industry itself. The code has no legal force.
This is an industry where the acceptability, the credibility of the industry is based on its relationships with professional people. And this is tremendously important in respect of the code of practice, because companies want to ensure that they have credibility, professional credibility, that their activities are seen to be ethical and as far as possible beyond reproach. And therefore member companies do indeed take the code of practice seriously.
Dr. Brian Lewis of the BMA is an independent medical member of the disciplinary committee that enforces the ABPI's code of practice.
Whilst nothing is perfect in this world, it has worked remarkably effectively. I mean, it has, in fact, brought a fair degree of probity to the way that things are handled. Now, having said that, of course, as in comparisons with the City of London, there will always be bad eggs or rotten apples in every battle, and there's no guarantee that you can ever put anything completely right.
Those representatives start off by learning about the code of practice. They take an exam in the code of practice. They have to know what's there. It's like a Bible for them. That is how we expect them to behave, and that's what they do.
So how does the industry's code work in practice? Calls on doctors. The number of visits made by a medical rep each year should not normally exceed, on average, 3 to each doctor.
That was, in my experience, was never adhered to. Just by the nature, again, of the job and the pressures put on the representatives, it could not be the case.
We were told to target doctors, the best prescribers, and to see them as often as we could.
I can confirm to you that that rule is how our representatives are instructed. It is even stated in their job description, and we expect our representatives to stay with an average call rate on individual doctors of up to and including 3 visits per doctor per year.
And another provision of the code: information about medical products should accurately reflect current knowledge or responsible opinion.
We would encourage a free flow of information between doctors and representatives, hospital doctors, general practice, wherever.
But this was not Eric Keeley's experience at Ciba-Geigy.
The company well knew at a time when they had recently launched a new product for arthritis, they knew that there had been a published report that there had been fatalities worldwide in relation to this product. And yet at that time we were told to refrain from discussing this. This memorandum states, 1, do not under any circumstances discuss this issue unless the topic is raised first of all by one of your doctors. 2, if it is raised, then it should be possible to dismiss it. And in this case, I say there were as many as 16 cases reported, 9 of which proved fatal. You know, I ask you, what do you feel about that? I mean, I find that's totally abhorrent.
What's your reaction to that?
My reaction to that is that that is something which we would no longer do. I think it has taken us the last 5 years to work on that. It's a very new concept within the pharmaceutical industry that the risk of medicines is taken right out front, and that patients are encouraged, as well as doctors, are encouraged now to think that nothing in life is without risk.
Gifts and inducements. Drug reps can hand out gifts to doctors, but they must be inexpensive and relevant to the practice of medicine.
I don't think there was a time that I was working for the company in the latter years that I was ever without inducement gifts in my car. And they were for that very specific purpose of inducing sales or rewarding doctors for sales achievements. Clocks, torches, pens, countless pens.
This Ciba-Geigy memo refers to one such inducement gift, a patella hammer. Reps, it says, should stop and think, what will I achieve for Tegretol sales by giving it to a doctor?
I will most certainly check into how this originated, who originated it, and that this is something for which the company should bear responsibility and for which we should take action.
Medical gifts to doctors were also handed out by reps from Roussel.
It's a little giveaway, they're barometers. They'd say that there was a link between being able to assess what the weather was like and seeing how many patients would be coming in feeling arthritic pains that day. In fact, there's a memorandum that came around from my regional manager, and it said, "Is there a link between weather and arthritis? Who knows and who cares very much anyway? Is there a link between representatives," and he has that crossed out, "salespeople skillfully using the barometers and generating valuable extra Sergam SA prescriptions? Very definitely." And he then goes on to talk about getting doctors to earn their barometer.
The next rule, hospitality should always be secondary to the main purpose of a meeting, and the cost should not exceed what doctors would normally pay themselves.
Several meetings held in my career at places like the Hyde Park Hilton Hotel in London, where the level of entertainment and cost was extremely lavish, and the cost per doctor head was something in the order of £200.
Total cost, £15,000. Brands Hatch, one of Britain's best-known motor racing circuits. Getting a grandstand view from their £1,500 a day hospitality suite, another group of doctors being treated to a day's entertainment. It's hardly the quietest place for a medical meeting, but that didn't deter the sponsors, drug company Cyanamid.
I've been invited by Cyanamid, who's a drug company. I'm a doctor, and they've just got a whole lot of doctors who claim to have an interest in motor racing.
Southport, Lancashire, a group of GPs on a day trip. They've travelled 100 miles from Walsall near Birmingham to play in a golf tournament at the Hillside Club. It's been organised by a drug company, Kirby Warwick, part of the American Shearing Plough Group. The company told us it was an educational medical meeting. The Royal College of Physicians recommend that when doctors accept hospitality, a useful criterion of acceptability may be, would you be willing to have these arrangements generally known?
Excuse me, we're from Yorkshire Television. Would you mind asking a few questions?
Quite on what?
Are you enjoying the golf here today?
Of course, love it, thank you very much. Yeah, delightful.
Where have you come from today?
Walsall in the West Midlands.
And who's paying for your trip here and for your golf?
I'm not prepared to say. I know that I'm not.
I mean, I put it to you that Kirby Warwick are paying for the golf, aren't they?
I would expect so, yes. Yeah.
Who's paying for your golf?
Well, I don't think I want to talk about it now, thanks.
Why is that? Are you a GP or a pharmacist?
I'm a GP, I'm a consultant.
Who's paying for your golf here today?
Kirby Warwick, isn't it?
And are you GPs? Are you doctors?
He's a doctor, we're pharmacists.
Yeah. And does it worry you that that a pharmaceutical company is paying for this kind of entertainment for doctors and pharmacists?
I don't find it worrying.
Yes. As a doctor, aren't you worried about this kind of entertainment by pharmaceutical companies?
No.
Well, what's the medical content of this entertainment today? I mean, what's the medical content of playing a round of golf?
It's showing of goodwill. There will be a talk on the drug afterwards. I mean, this comes after the golf. There's leisure activities first.
But surely you wouldn't come for the talk unless you'd got the golf.
Very likely not, no.
So really, the golf is an inducement for you to come and hear the sales pitch?
Yes, I think you could say that.
Despite what the doctors told us on the day, Shearing Plough stated that they had always planned to collect the golfing fees from the doctors afterwards, and did so the following week.
I'm not in the business of defending the indefensible. I really do not believe that golf tournaments have any part in this exercise, and I wouldn't defend it for a moment. And I think that the Code of Practice has done its best to bring this under control, but of course it isn't an agent provocateur. It has to have people who report things to it, and it can take action on those when they occur.
Next, the code allows free drug samples to be given by reps to doctors to introduce their product. Samples should not represent more than 4 days' treatment for a single patient. They should be strictly limited in quantity.
The quantities involved would have no relationship to 4 days' treatment. You'd give basically as much as you needed to give, and you could always get further supplies from your area manager.
So how many samples would you give them?
Oh, thousands. Thousands.
We don't throw samples around. We can't afford to do that for many reasons. We can't afford to do it because it would be irresponsible, and we can't afford to do it because it would cost too much. So there's every reason to stay within the Code of Practice, and that's what we do.
But confirmation that some doctors do collect free drug samples comes from pharmacist Mile James.
They might take them down to a friendly pharmacist and see if he'll swap them for a camera or some perfume for the wife or something like that, or just general credit. Or if they're in a rural area and are therefore allowed to supply medicines to patients, well, they might hand them out to the patients and tell the National Health Service they paid the normal price. Nobody's going to be the wiser.
So they're actually getting the money back from the National Health Service for drugs that they've been given free?
It can happen.
Isn't that defrauding the National Health Service?
I'm not a lawyer, I'm a pharmacist.
And how widespread would you say that practice is?
It's very difficult to tell. Trouble is, very few people, with the exception of the very courageous people you've got on this, will actually come and blow the whistle. I do know that it goes on, and one hears an awful lot of stories about reps being asked to clear their boots when they go around to visit doctors and this sort of thing.
What does that mean, clear the boots?
Well, they get given a large number of samples by their company to encourage doctors to prescribe the particular drug that they've got. They go into a doctor and the doctor will say, right, what have you got in your boot? I'll have it all.
I would be very surprised if that was the case in more than exceptional circumstances, and it's very clearly a bribe and it's very clearly wrong.
Another provision of the code, purported surveys or trials. Reps can collect information on drug use, but the trial must produce medically useful information.
The industry will have a trial called a post-marketing surveillance trial, where the doctor will be asked to prescribe the drug and then will be asked to fill in quite complicated forms saying if the patient tolerated it or got unwanted effects and the like. The trouble is that this system has been abused and that it's been used by the industry to penetrate the market.
Someone with first-hand knowledge of such abuse is Dr. Gerald Michael. He was visited in his North London surgery by a drug rep asking him to take part in a trial on a new drug. The reward, £100 in cash.
The whole manner about him was as though he was trying to sort of say, look, boys, do it for the money. You'll make £100. We're quite happy to pay you in cash. I've already had 40 doctors signed up this way, and they're very pleased to do it. And the whole thing seemed much more like a bribe. We looked at the form, it was scientifically valueless. It wouldn't have given any useful information either to medicine or even to the firm. To think that we would choose money as a factor for prescribing for patients, we thought that was really quite sort of insulting, really.
But what about the 40 doctors who'd accepted it?
Well, hopefully that wasn't true, but I don't know. I mean, there's nothing more about that. If 40 doctors did accept it, then I think that if their patients knew, they'd feel very let down that was the reason why that drug was chosen by the doctors.
If there's a trick, a loophole, a drug company will use it.
This man does not wish to be identified because he wants to work as a salesman again.
The systematic use of surveys to reward doctors for prescribing was first exposed by drug rep Nigel Kirkman. He never worked in the pharmaceutical industry again.
Well, basically, we were doing what was considered at the time bogus trials, and in effect what we were doing really was giving the doctor a financial gift incentive to put patients on our products.
After these revelations, in 1986, Bayer were brought before the disciplinary committee of the ABPI. It was the most serious breach of the code of practice ever, and Bayer received the code's ultimate sanction, suspension from ABPI membership, but free to carry on trading. Bayer were reinstated in January 1988, but last year the company were found guilty again. A Bayer rep had offered a doctor £100 in return for a bogus receipt. But if doctors can be offered money for bogus receipts, does direct bribery ever occur? That's forbidden by the most serious rule in the code. No financial inducements shall be offered or given to doctors for the purposes of sales promotion.
We had a regional meeting. In fact, I've written it down in my diary that I kept that year. And I've actually written down the date, so it was in March. It was the 11th of March, which was a Friday. We had a regional sales meeting, and my regional sales manager said that he came right out with it. There were no double entendres. He just said that this is how it's done. And he got one of the reps in the area to stand up and say how he increased his sales. And he used to bribe doctors with cash to write his products.
So what they're saying to you was to bribe the doctors. They were actually telling you to bribe doctors.
Absolutely in no uncertain terms. To get out there and bribe. And they were saying that it works. And the guy who was actually saying it, the rep who was saying it, was one of the company's top reps. What my regional manager did to try and get me to involve myself in these deals was to initiate them and then tell me to take the second payment. And I mean, in this one, he said here, some very good news. Yes, this is another order from Dr. X's practice. He has put 6 patients on SA in the last week, and his partners have prescribed 15. Bribery and corruption certainly working here. He will contact you with the next order. I have organised an initial £100 donation for him personally.
The sales manager who sent this memo has now left Roussel, and there is no suggestion that these practices are still continuing.
Well, it's that's absolutely abominable way of dealing with issues. What they forget is that in the end, the crucial thing is for doctors to be informed so they can give impartial advice and decide on impartial information to treat patients for the best advantage for the patient and the public. What we can't afford to have is a drug being prescribed because a rep has given something or bribed somebody. That is totally unacceptable. It cannot possibly be in the interests of patients and patient welfare, and it has to be stopped.
The way a bribe is actually executed is, in terms of cash, it is perfectly legal to pay for a lunch meeting. I say legal within the parameters of the ABPI regulations. So what I would do to a doctor is I'll say, well, look, I'll give you a cheque for £50 or £100 or whatever, and I would like you to give me a receipt on surgery-headed notepaper, just saying that you've received for lunch meetings, you know, the sum of £50 or £100.
And did those lunches and the meetings take place?
No.
These are Maureen Plantagenet's weekly meetings reports. They show that certain doctors received regular payments to attend promotional meetings, and the explanation given? To watch the same video on the same drug again and again. The reports were sent to Roussel's head office.
What surprised me is how easy it was to do. I mean, it really did shock me. For example, I went in to see this doctor once, and I said, look, you get £50 a month to buy 50 packets of Sergam. I want you to put that up to 100 packets of Sergam. I'll give you £100 a month. I want you to double your order. So I left him 2 cheques, one for £50 and one for 100. And when I went back home, he rang me up and he said, right, we've decided to go for the 100 and I'll send you back your cheque for £50 and cash the £100 cheque. It was really as simple as that.
It surprised me in that it's happening so soon after my company was supposedly disciplined for it, and you'd expect the ABPI to be a bit hot on this kind of thing now. But in a way, it doesn't surprise me. It's the most cost-effective way of getting sales for, I don't know how much they're giving, £5, £10 investment. You're probably getting, I don't know, £20 a month for the rest of that patient's life. So it's a very good investment. It's bound to happen. And the ABPI is just unable to control that.
I think that if doctors have such cash incentives to write drugs, they may give patients drugs, for example, when they don't need drugs at all, but they might be tempted to give patients drugs if they have a very distant past history of something like an ulcer. And that's the thing that bothers me. And I used to sit down when I got home from work and I used to think, I wonder if I'm killing people.
The most heavily promoted drugs of all, the anti-inflammatory painkillers given for arthritis, have a well-established side effect, ulcers. A study of the South Cheshire Hospital region found that 80% of patients who died from perforated ulcers were taking this type of drug. The study's author, consultant surgeon Dr. Christopher Armstrong.
We looked very carefully at all our patients and found that a large number of patients were taking these for rheumatoid arthritis and osteoarthritis. But we also found a significant group of patients in whom we could find no real reason for them having been given anti-inflammatory drug. The only reason noted on the general practitioner's notes were minor aches and sprains. And those patients would have equally well been served by the use of minor painkillers such as paracetamol.
Doesn't that worry you?
It worries me very much indeed. Over 26 million prescriptions for anti-inflammatory drugs are handed out in this country per year. It's the most widely prescribed group of drugs in this country.
And some of the patients that are getting them don't need them at all.
Probably not.
And yet their lives are being threatened by it.
Very much so.
I'll just go on record. We know that a lot of patients suffer by the excessive use of drugs. This is not acceptable. Patients should come first.
There is no suggestion that the practices that we've uncovered are common policy throughout the industry, but our evidence shows that commercial pressure can at times lead to abuse. The industry's own voluntary and self-policing code has been in force for 32 years with no legal powers. Is it now time for change?
Certainly there should be a much tighter statutory controls. At the moment the thing is falling apart, there must be change, and hopefully the change will be soon.
I don't claim that anything is perfect. I do believe the code is going to need tightening. Whether the teeth should be applied throughout the industry, in other words, whether the industry should have the power to do it, or whether, in fact, you hand this to the major buyer, the government, or the civil and criminal courts, is for others to look at.
People have said to me, why didn't I complain to the ABPI? Well, what's the point? They have absolutely no clout at all. There's no obligation that a drug company should join the ABPI, and quite a lot of reps out there working for drug companies that aren't even members of the association. And if the ABPI actually decides to blacklist or sanction or whatever it is any drug company, all they can do is just say, okay, well, you know, you're struck off for a year or whatever. It makes no difference at all.
We believe that the self-policing activity of the industry through the Code of Practice is sufficient to maintain the sort of standards that we would wish to see in our relationship with the profession and in retaining the confidence of the public over these issues.
The Department of Health told us we are satisfied with the working of the Code of Practice. There are no plans to bring in statutory controls.